You are listening to WMPG Portland Gorham. Welcome to Let's Connect Greater Portland, a show about the changes and challenges we face and the fantastic things people are doing to make our region a great place to live, work, and play. I'm Tom Bell, your host. Today we're talking about wastewater, not usually the most glamorous topic, but one that sits at the heart of how communities grow, protect their environment, and plan for the future. In Yarmouth, a single pump station near the Royal River moves about two-thirds of the town's wastewater, and is now running close to capacity. Town officials say that unless it's upgraded, future housing and commercial projects could stall, and the town could risk another overflow event like the one that happened in early 2024. Critics are concerned about the cost to taxpayers and wonder why the town was not prepared for this crisis. To help us understand what's at stake and how the town plans to move forward, I'm joined by Yarmouth Town Manager Scott LaFlamme and Town Councilor Chair Karin Orenstein. Scott, Karin, welcome to the show.
Tom, thanks for having us.
Great to be here. Thanks.
Scott, let's start with the basics. For people who might not know exactly what the Royal River Pump Station does, can you describe where it is and why it's so important?
Yeah, of course. And Tom, thanks again for having us. The idea and this conversation of aging infrastructure is not something that Yarmouth is looking at individually. It's something that I think a lot of Maine communities are struggling with, sort of similar vintage infrastructure that's moving, and it's a critical piece of how we operate and how people can have convenience in their home to wash their hands, flush their toilets, and all the same. So in Yarmouth, we have 30-plus pump stations that we operate. There's two that are the largest, the Royal River Pump Station being one of them. It's located behind the Rose School, in between the Rose School and the Royal River, and it is one of our largest pump stations. And as you mentioned before, it flows about two-thirds of our septic waste, who are folks who are connected into our sewer system in Yarmouth. And so it's an important piece and critical piece of infrastructure that we have because of that, and because it sits right in the middle of our growth area. It's where we want to see development. It's where our village lives. It's where sort of the heart of our community, and it's an important piece because, again, if we want to see any type of continued growth, or if we want to avoid some potential hazardous situations with having untreated sewage into the Royal River, we need to act quickly. And again, as you mentioned, it's something that's been we've been aware of for the last several years, but has become sort of a critical question that we're facing as a community more recently.
And right now it's operating close to the limit. How did the town realize that this was becoming a problem? And why didn't the town first see this happening earlier before it was a crisis situation?
Sure. Good questions. So the town operates through a capital improvement planning process, right? So we look at a horizon, generally at a 5-year horizon of what we have for these types of fixed assets and different pieces of infrastructure that we operate on a daily basis. And we use that as a tool to budget over a series of years to pay for large capital upgrades. This, as Karin will get into a little bit later in the conversation, I'm sure, is an expensive endeavor for the town, and it's something that we have been budgeting for over a series of years, but clearly not enough. And so it's prompted this question that the voters are going to have a chance to weigh in on in November. But this is really a 1960s era infrastructure that, again, has been meticulously upkept by our incredible wastewater crew. But again, it's been on our radar for a little while. In February of 2024, we had an unfortunate situation where we had a lot of snow melt and rain at the same time, and we had an overflow event where untreated sewage made its way across the Royal River Byway, or the walkway into the Royal River Park to the Royal River, which caused the closure of clam flats for 21 days and other things that are required through our state permitting. And
So there's no pipe from the pump that goes in the Royal River.
It is not.
If the sewage is flowed right over the walkway into the river.
Yeah. So the way that the operation works is that we have force mains that go to this pump station. The pump station is then fed to separate pump stations that eventually make it to our sewage treatment plant, where the waste is treated and chlorinated, and that process goes so that when the water gets back into the receiving waters, which is Casco Bay, it's totally treated, and it is just like any other water that makes its way into the water, into the ocean.
So what happened in 2024? I mean, what was the impact, and did you get people calling town hall complaining about the odors? What was that like?
Well, it's something that we knew right away. And again, our wastewater treatment crew has all kinds of very elaborate pieces of technology that I don't know enough about, but our folks know a great deal about and knew immediately when there was an overflow event, and so they worked to get that fixed right away. But again, it was a situation where we had this large influx of water that we didn't anticipate in an undersized pump station, and we just couldn't keep up. The pumps just couldn't keep up with it. So again, it's an unfortunate situation that sort of brought to the forefront of the need for us to look into this into the future. And over the year after that, we've had a handful of sort of good-sized infill development projects that have come in front of the planning board and gotten approvals. Through that process, our staff looks at the wastewater impacts, looks at the flow projections, and determines whether or not that facility has the capacity to take on additional sewage flow. And through that process, found, we may have a capacity problem here, which prompted a much larger study, which sort of has informed the decisions that we're making today.
Karin, this brings us to the November bond referendum. Can you explain what that proposal includes?
Sure. So when voters see the ballot, they're going to have the opportunity to authorize the town to issue a bond for $7.5 million. And that money will not only upgrade that wastewater facility, it'll also upgrade the pipe that it is pushing the water into. Because if you can imagine, you can have stronger impellers pushing the sewage down to the next pump station. But if you don't have a big enough pipe to push it into, you haven't really increased your capacity. So it's going to do both of those.
And what's the impact on taxpayers?
Oh, that's the big question, Scott.
That's $1 million, the $7.5 million.
$7.5 million question. So there is some good news on this front. We had a revaluation in town, and most of it has been bad news. But the good news is that we were very conservative when we looked at the business districts that are in TIF districts, so tax increment financing districts. These are districts where the increase in value over time because of economic development, that the taxes from that increased value are sheltered, and the town can use 100% of it for specific purposes. This is one of those purposes we can use it for, infrastructure that affects economic development. So we expect to have enough funds coming in because of the revaluation that we hadn't anticipated before, that we can use to apply to pre-bond work, so design work, maybe even getting into some construction, so that when we go to the bond market, we can ask for less money. That will keep the payments on the bond down to a lower number. And whatever is left over from that, we would also apply toward the debt service on the bond. So we're voting on a resolution tonight. By the time people hear this podcast, we've already voted on it. But the resolution says this is what the town council plans to do, to be able to pay for the bond in this coming fiscal year. We can't really commit to what will happen in future years. But if we do this for the coming fiscal year, there will be no property tax impact based on passing the bond.
This year?
For this year, which is the next fiscal year that starts in June.
But what can we say about the future? I don't understand.
So I think it's important to just note, so the town council, the constitution of the town council changes on an annualized basis. There's new folks and new perspectives that are added and sort of rolled off the council on an annual basis. So I think the council has been really cautious on making decisions for future councils, knowing that they may or may not be part of those conversations. So for now, the council that is currently constituted, like Karin said, they're going to be discussing it during tonight's meeting, is prepared to make a statement of intent for the budget that they can control, and encouraging future councils to take similar steps in the future to limit the impact on taxpayers.
So this TIF money being used to be spent on this, if it wasn't spent on this, what would have had been spent on?
Well, it hasn't been allocated yet in the town's budget. Every year we get some advice from our Economic Development Advisory Board on how we should use the TIF funds, and then the Town Council decides how it will be used. It can be used for different economic development projects, infrastructure. We've used it as matches for
federal grants, state grants, yeah. And these are set out by statute, state statute, on what you can and can't use it for. And the town has the development fund program, which outlines what we have sort of approvals from the state to spend those monies on. And so, as Karin mentioned, this is sort of an annual exercise to look at what we have for capital projects that are eligible, economic development programming, business assistance programming, things like that, to retain and expand our commercial base, and ultimately use this as a place where invest in ways that will attract businesses to, again, relocate or stay and make Yarmouth a great place to work.
And this chunk of money that's now newly available because of the revaluation, we anticipate it will be there in future years as well. It comes in every year as part of property taxes from those districts.
You mentioned the revaluation, and that has a lot of people in town angry, right? And are you worried that some people can look at this ballot question as like a way to send a message to the town to express their anger and their lack of confidence in the town officials?
Well, I think probably the easy the clear answer is probably yes. I think we're in a situation where we have a series of unfortunate events, right? We have we've had this revaluation is probably overdue, and it's in Yarmouth taxpayers are facing the same challenges that lots of other southern Maine communities are dealing with, which is sort of a very rapidly changing real estate market and a lot of other economic indicators that are sort of adjusting how those property values are set.
And there's more of a shift from commercial to residential.
Absolutely, yeah. So there's lots of different economic variables that are impacting that process, and it's certainly, I think, so the end impact is different than what we had originally anticipated, knowing that some of those factors were going to be in place. But I think there's a lot of strain, and frankly, there's a lot of just heightened anxiety and lots of big feelings just with the way that the world is right now. It's sort of shifting, and lots of frustrations that are happening in different levels of government that are sort of all trickling down to local conversations. So I anticipate that'll be part of it. But again, I think what we've been trying to share throughout the last several months, as we've known that this has been a problem, is that this is not sort of a nice to have. These are critical pieces of infrastructure that we're required by the state to maintain, and we frankly want to be good stewards of the Royal River and Kaskaskia Bay.
And going back to your question about will the revaluation impact how people feel about the bond, the main impact of the revaluation is on their property taxes. And they just got their property tax bills within the last week or so. And for some people, it went up 10, 20, 30% or more. And so in that sense, it's a very bad year to be asking people to pay for a bond for critical infrastructure. And that's why we're trying to find a way to use TIF funds so that that would not happen, that their property taxes would not be increased as a result.
So one question people often ask is the timing of the Railroad Square approval. This was this large condominium project in the center of town near the railroad tracks. It was approved before the wastewater study was completed. Can you walk us through that?
Sure. Yeah, happy to do that. And Phil, you want to run through the calendar of events there, Karin?
Yeah, I think I can do that. Okay. So the Railroad Square project had been before the planning board for years, in different iterations, different owners of the project coming through. In early 2024, when we had that overflow event, there was a version of it that was before the planning board. And when it came to the planning board that spring, the planning department and the town engineer immediately reacted to the overflow event and said, we don't know what the wastewater capacity is. We've had an overflow event. It's time to find out what our capacity is. We know we have 30-year-old equipment. We know it's nearing end of life, but we need to know whether it can support your new development. And so the developer at that time paid for the wastewater capacity study. It took about a year to get that study back, and around the time that it came back, the project was up for final review. So some people are asking, why would we allow it to have a final review without having the wastewater capacity study. And these kinds of things happen all the time with the planning department, the planning board. They issue conditions. We approve this conditioned on. And so there are often many conditions. And in this case, one of them was that if the wastewater capacity review shows that we have an issue here, you'll be part of the solution up to what is equitable for your development to contribute. And so that same developer is paying for half of an improvement to the wastewater facility right now. We've got one impeller that pushes sewage through that is at 71% capacity. They're bringing that up to 100% capacity. They're replacing that impeller. Very expensive repair. They're paying for half of it. And then to replace the entire station, that we need the town to do together, because it's not equitable to ask the developer to replace 30-year-old infrastructure that helps 2/3 of the town pass its sewage.
Just to clarify, 30 years ago was the last improvements there. The facility itself is 1960s vintage, and so you think about how the community's changed just from 1960. The force mains that are, as Karin mentioned before, sort of pushing that sewage through that facility, and the type of just organic growth that we've seen over the last 4 or 5 decades. Steve Johnson, who's our town engineer, is the good example of you wouldn't have a 60-year-old car and not think that it needed to be replaced or improved over time. So it's just like a Buick, but much larger and more expensive. And
like with cars, the technology has improved. It's changed. We're going to be putting in the most current technology to achieve our capacity.
What's the issue with so there's a moratorium on growth in certain parts of the town. Mm-hmm. Could you explain that to me?
Yeah, so we call the area that is served by the Royal River pump station the sewer shed for that area, not the water shed, but the sewer shed. And that is in the heart of the town. It serves 2/3 of the town's needs.
What area?
It's mostly in the village and what we call the MDR, the medium density residential section of town.
It's in the village side of Route 1. So Route 1 is sort of the bisector of the community. So I'm going to try to get my orientations right. It's, I think, the western side of Route 1. So it's within the village. It's all the way to the North Yarmouth town line.
And this is actually the part of the town where the town thinks is best suited for growth?
Yes, in our comprehensive plan, we've identified this as our growth area. So it's a real challenge, because this is where we want to be putting new units in town. This is where we want to be putting affordable housing in town. Our climate action plan supports having more housing where you have transportation and services, not out in the boonies of the outskirts of town.
And how long is this moratorium in place? And what happens if voters turn down this bond?
Yeah, I can take that, Karin,
Sure.
if you'd like. So the moratorium is for 180 days. And again, that is outlined by state statute. It can't be any more than 180 days unless you are making actionable steps to sort of eliminate the need for that moratorium. So you can extend them out, pursuant that you're making, a good college try on trying to make things better. So one of the things that we were concerned about on a staff level as this sort of this topic came up and the restrictions that we have flow-wise at the pump station was, how do we equitably adjudicate or administer building permits within the affected sewer shed here in a way that doesn't even have the perception of favoritism. We wanted to have a really clear and delineated process so that we could accurately, make sure that we could move projects forward that didn't impact the sewer shed, but to not have that sort of gut call from staff. And so we worked with the town council to develop a moratorium that basically said we're not going to allow for development within the sewer shed for 180 days. Now, Karin can maybe talk through some of the adjustments, because I think we've been trying our best to find some reasonable carve-outs for folks. But again, until the pump station is replaced, and we're looking, if it's approved by voters in November, we're looking at about a 3-year horizon between now and when it's designed and engineered and ultimately available to take on additional flow. Throughout that 3-year time period, we're going to be able to adjust that moratorium based on what we have for certainty and what we have for timelines, more concrete timelines.
So you would be able to extend the moratorium if you're showing that you're taking corrections.
Yep.
And let's say the bond issue fails,
Mm-hmm.
right? But people have a legal right, if they're area zone for
Mm-hmm.
a multifamily, they could build a multifamily, and if you're not allowing that, right, isn't that a taking? And can't they take legal action against the town?
So all of these are conditioned on having the capacity to accept that new development, right? So for each building permit that comes in for anything that lives, if it's a multi-family development, for example, it's likely going to need to go through some sort of level of site plan review at the planning board. Those will be a condition of the review. So they say, hey, we've got this 10-unit apartment complex that we'd like to put smack dab in the middle of the village. They'll go through the major site plan review process. At that point, planning board say, yeah, it meets all the meets and bounds. By right, you're able to do that based on the zone, but it's conditioned on having the ability to flush your toilets and for that waste to go somewhere. And so what will end up happening is, because we know that there's not enough capacity, that project may get approval, right? Hypothetically. And again, the moratorium outlines some more specifics on that. But assuming you get approval by the planning board and there's not enough capacity, you may still get the approval for that project, but it cannot be constructed until there's suitable flow.
So there are a large number of people in town actually who want Yarmouth to stay just the way it is, right? Mm-hmm. And you see at the planning board, people oppose all sorts of development. And for these people who are basically the anti-development people in Yarmouth, are you worried that they may vote no on this just as a way to stop growth?
Sure, they have the right to do that. But the reality of southern Maine is growth. We've seen that. And the reason that we have comprehensive plans is that we want to make sure that we shape that growth in a smart way. So growth is going to come anyway. They really can't avoid it. Not letting us have the infrastructure to handle growth in a smart way is hurting the town.
Yeah. I think the other thing, too, is, there's a lot of conversation about the future of Yarmouth, right, and the future growth. But this is a problem that we're facing right now. I mean, the overflow event that we had in 2024, that's a one-year storm. We're going to see more intense storms in the future. And again, we may see just through the existing capacity that we have there, when we have a strong rain event or we have a snow melt with rain event again, there's a very high likelihood that we're going to have a similar overflow event. So this isn't, we are certainly looking towards the future. And again, with the long range planning tools that we have developed as a community, but also long range housing, especially housing development policy that's coming from the state of Maine that we're going to need to make changes to adopt. We're looking at those as sort of a practical application here and making sure that we're set up for the future and have capacity so we don't do this in another 30 years. But again, this is a problem that we're facing right now. And again, with the age and vintage of the infrastructure that we have right now, this is not something that's going to go away. It's something that needs to happen. And this is, I think, an appropriate way to do that.
You're listening to Let's Connect Greater Portland, the show about the people and ideas shaping life in southern Maine. Today I'm talking with Yarmouth Town Manager Scott LaFlamme and Town Council Chair Karin Orenstein about the town's wastewater crisis and how it impacts property taxes and growth in the future. Karin, you wanted to mention something.
Yeah, so Tom, earlier you had asked about, what if somebody wants to vote against the bond as a way of voting against growth and development in town? And one of the answers is also that it won't actually stop things. It will actually put us in a worse financial position and a worse environmental position because, like Scott said, these kinds of storms will come again. And so when that happens, we are sending raw sewage untreated into the Royal River, and then from there out into Casco Bay. And when we do that, we have to report it to the State Department of Environmental Protection. And DEP can issue daily fines when we are out of, what do they call it?
Compliance.
Out of compliance with our permit. And eventually they can force us into a consent order to replace the pump station. So having to do that on a different timeline, having paid fines, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And then that whole time, we're not fixing a problem.
What's the impact of no growth on property taxes?
So we've been doing counselor coffee hours recently, and somebody came in and said, I don't want to see no growth because when you add units into town, my property taxes will go down. And that's somebody who's acknowledging the reality of the situation.
Yeah, and I think that's true. And part of our comprehensive planning and longer-term growth strategy is and we have lots of different goals that the town council and has set in the last several years, which has, I think, helped us to have a sort of clear vision on what we would like to do in this particular situation. But, we're looking at having a diverse community, a place where sort of both diversity of socioeconomic backgrounds have the sort of shared opportunity to live and enjoy this community. We're also looking for a robust economic community as well, with a diverse set of business types and employment opportunities. And again, we're hearing, we talk with businesses every day, right? And we're looking at and learning about restrictions to finding quality employees and retaining quality employees. Housing continues to be the biggest driver. They just can't find places to live. And again, we're not alone in this, right? The entire state is struggling with housing availability and affordability. But again, we have set ourselves up as a community through a robust outreach effort to learn about what's important to us as a community and making policy decisions that help impact that.
And the kind of development you're talking about in this area, in terms of the infill development, higher density, isn't that the kind of development in which the payoff in terms of property taxes is going to be better than the kind of big lot, sprawly subdivisions that require long roads to service?
Yeah, absolutely. No doubt.
So a while back, I talked to Christina Egan, the executive director of GPCOG, and she told me about a study that was done in Freeport, where they determined that for every new unit of housing you put into the growth area versus every new unit you put outside the growth area, you have a net benefit for the town in terms of property taxes versus services provided. And it's the opposite when you put it outside the growth area. We've actually, we're working with GPCOG now to get a similar analysis done for Yarmouth. But that's the assumption, is that when you grow in the growth area, you are financially better off than doing otherwise.
And the enrollment trends in the schools, I mean, is there capacity to absorb more growth?
Yeah, I think, and again, this is a great conversation that we're having with the school committee right now and trying to look at what our financial needs are moving forward. But we've seen over the last several years, we saw sort of a pretty constant uptick pre-COVID, and then enrollment has really flatlined over the last several years and maybe going down a little bit. So I think the answer is yes, and the town has gone through a pretty rapid expansion of our school facilities, making sure that they're upgraded and that they can meet our current capacity. And I think that continues to be seems to be sufficient with what we've got going on. But again, those are sort of the long-term policy conversations that the council will continue to have with the school committee.
And let's also add that Railroad Square development is a 55 plus, so a more senior skewed development. I don't want to say that 55 is senior yet.
I was going to say you're
getting a little close.
Yeah.
But that kind of development adds to the tax base without really impacting the schools very much. And it does a great thing for our Main Street. This would be right off of Main Street. Imagine the people going out to our restaurants and stores right there.
Yeah. Yeah, that particular development is exciting for a couple different reasons. A, it's a mixed use, right? So it's going to be a combination of residential and commercial properties, but it also provides a lot more depth to our Main Street, which is really sort of the crown jewel for the community, and it's just going to add a whole new dynamic to our village core.
And we'll be a top taxpayer in town.
It will. Yeah, when it's fully built out.
Lots of benefits.
So I actually live on Main Street in Yarmouth, and I heard about this project being 55. You have to be older than 55 years, and I thought, it seems to me the entire Yarmouth Village is a 55 plus community.
You said that, Tom, not me.
Before we wrap up, is there anything either of you would like residents to keep in mind as they consider this question on the November ballot?
This is critical infrastructure. It's something the town needs in order to keep functioning right now, let alone into our future. And this bond is not going to increase their property taxes.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say we're aware of a lot of the pressures that folks are feeling, and are taking those into consideration as we pursue these types of project development. And I know I don't want to speak for the Karin or the council, but it is in the forefront of the council's mind when making policy decisions and trying to make sure that things are being done thoughtfully. And again, I think to a certain extent we're learning from the past to better prepare ourselves for the future. And so again, I just want to, for folks who listen to this, we understand. And again, I want to make sure that as we move forward with this, and that folks know that that their thoughts are sort of in the forefront of our decision-making process.
And where people can go to get more information about this bond question? Sure,
yeah. So we have a dedicated project page on the town's website. So if you go to yarmouth.me.us/bond2025, there's a full overview and FAQ on the project to date. We also have been sharing things pretty regularly through our social media, various social media handles. They're on Instagram, Facebook, our YouTube page. We do a weekly video series where I talk about things going on in town. It's called our Friday Five. There's a whole archive of those Friday Fives on the town's website as well. And if folks have not signed up for our e-newsletter, it goes out monthly and as needed. And the wonderful Leo Nieder pulls that together and is a great resource for news, things happening in town.
Great. Karin, Scott, thank you so much for being here today. Thanks to our audio engineer, Anella Linton, and to WMPG for partnering with the Greater Portland Council of Governments to make this show possible. Follow us on Instagram at Let's Connect Radio for updates and links to past episodes. I'm Tom Bell. See you every Thursday at 1 p.m. on Let's Connect Greater Portland. Until next time, be kind to yourself and to each other.